This is Scoreboard with Chris Titley. Powered by Swiftex. Where can crypto take you?
Hi, it's Chris Titley here on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast. I'm joined by Zach Tuohy. Zach, good morning.
Good morning, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Mate, not a problem. We're sitting here on Friday, the 27th of March. How's your Friday morning been? And also, how's your 2026 been so far?
Yeah, it's been good. It's this morning's been a little bit adventurous. We were just talking off recording. I dropped my dog to the vet to get his knackers done. So he's very excited for the vet. I don't think he knows what's coming, but and then, which we didn't mention, Ireland just lost the penalty shootout to Czechia in the World Cup qualifiers. So you'll have to forgive me if my mood isn't as high as it could have been. So been quite an adventurous, 3 or 4 hours this morning. So
Yes,
I'll do my best.
Now you're jumping on the podcast. So you keep an eye on Ireland in various different sports wherever possible.
Yeah, so this is big for us. World Cup qualification was on the cards, and if we'd won, we would have had to get over Denmark in a few days. We were 2-0 up in this game. I'm not sure when this will go out, but we were 2-0 up, got back to 2-2 and just lost on penalties. So a bloody good campaign for the Irish team. We've been slightly down in the doldrums in the last sort of, 10, 15 years probably. So it was a good campaign, very proud and all that, but it's just so close.
Yeah, that's frustrating as well. And just like that, the length of period of time now, you're like, it's just like this long drag until the next one, right? That's
Yeah, it feels that way. And qualification is pretty hard when you come from the part of the world we come from, because you end up playing against some pretty handy teams. So it does feel like a long time since we were at a World Cup, but we're getting there. It's clearly improving, and I've been in sport long enough to know that it never happens quick, but the trend line for Ireland's pretty obvious right now.
Yeah, that's brilliant, mate. And going back to your Irish roots growing up, play many sports, obviously Gaelic football is in amongst it all, but any other sports and what your sort of childhood obsession, was it with sport?
Yeah, it was absolutely sport and not much else. It was soccer. I loved it. I wanted to be a professional soccer player. I'm a diehard Liverpool fan. If I was going to have any pathway to professional sport, it was going to be soccer, and that was kind of the childhood dream. But I played Gaelic football, obviously played hurling as well. So that was kind of the three sports I played. I'm not sure how familiar people will be with hurling, but it's an incredible sport, but it was probably third on the line for me. And it was a toss up between soccer and football. And once I realised, one, that I was best at Gaelic football. I think that was the sport which I was most competent at. And two, I probably wasn't going to be a professional soccer player. You kind of have to have quote unquote made it by the time you're 14 in that game. It's pretty reckless. So when I got to 15, 16, I was excelling at Gaelic football. I kind of had to park the rest, focus on Gaelic football, which thankfully I did, because that's really the only reason I ended up in the AFL. But yeah, it was hurling, probably third, and then I love soccer and football.
And the Gaelic football side of things, when you were growing up, and I probably don't know the answer to this, it was an amateur sport. Was there something there that you think, okay, I wanted to play for a particular county or a particular thing, or play at Croke Park, etc.?
Yeah, there was a few little mini milestones when you're growing up, and like I'm from a place called Laois, so you have to play with where you're from. It's not really like, well, I've ambition to go and play for this team or this team. It was playing senior intercounty football for your county, and that was the ambition. And I was quite late to the county scene, even at the underage representative levels. I was really quite a timid, like, young man. So I was a very quite extrovert around people I was comfortable with, but more broadly, I was lacking confidence hugely in both football and the other stuff that young blokes need to have confidence in. I didn't really have it, so I never tried out for the county team, like under 14s and 16s. I played one or two games at the under 16 representative level, but that was only because I was asked. Somebody actually approached my father, somebody who works with my father, and was involved himself in the intercounty scene, sort of asked why I hadn't been along and why I hadn't gone. Because I think I was probably good enough, but I just didn't have the confidence to put myself forward. So I kind of got dragged kicking and screaming into the intercounty scene eventually. But yeah, it was just play intercounty football, and that was the height you could ever hope to reach.
And then growing up as a child, did you have any inclination of what AFL was, keeping one eye on it, and didn't know anything about it? Your thoughts when you were a teenager?
Yeah, no, so I was very much aware of it. So a few years before, I actually remember watching a documentary that got made about Satanto Halpine when he was at Carlton. So he was there, he would have come over maybe in '04 or '05, just a few years before I did. And they made a documentary, and I can remember sitting on the couch watching it. Obviously, coincidentally, that was also about Carlton, where I would eventually end up. But even more close to home, there was a guy, Colin Begley, who played in the same county I'm from. He's 2 or 3 years older than me, 3 or 4 maybe, and he got drafted to Brisbane Lions a couple of years before me as well. So this was quite big news where we're from, because we are from a small area. Um, so it was very much on my radar. And from the second I realized that it might be any kind of viable opportunity, I was all in on the AFL. Now, at that point, there was no way of really putting yourself forward. You just had to hope you got spotted. Whereas now, I think players can kind of put their hand up and say, "I'd like to have a crack at it." But um, I was all in on it, and I was so excited at the prospect that I might get spotted, and even just be invited to a trial, which is eventually kind of what happened.
Yeah, and then when you came to Australia, was it your first time that you'd come to Australia? And I'm curious to go back to your brain then about what you thought of Australia
Mm.
and what you thought of AFL.
So my whole life, I wanted to be a professional athlete. That ship sails from a soccer point of view, and then it sort of comes back on the scene a few years later. So I was all in. I couldn't believe this was happening. The prospect of flying to Australia was really exciting to me. When I was 17, I came first on a 2 week trial, or a bit more, 2.5 week trial. And I was so sure this is what I was going to want to do. And in my mind, it was like the flash cars and a big fancy training facility, and everyone's a squillionaire, and it's home and away, beaches, and all this jazz. And then I got out. My first game was up in Ballarat in the depths of winter, and I'm up there in a singlet and bloody shorts. It's the coldest I've ever been. The training itself, I didn't particularly enjoy. I didn't enjoy the club. They were in the middle of a renovation, so we're in this dingy underground, nothing facility. And I just remember thinking, this is not what it was meant to be. And I was devastated, to be honest, because like up until that point, I'd been obsessed with coming out, and I left it. I left that 2 weeks going, this is crap. Like, this is not. I don't know if I want this. Um, Thankfully, I forced myself to come back on a second trial the following year, and that was much better. And even then, I was a bit unsure. But the truth is, and I've said this a few times, I didn't enjoy my first trip out here at all, really. And again, a little bit of that was my timid nature. I was kind of left to my own devices in the club, and that doesn't suit somebody who's already lacking confidence.
Yeah, what about your confidence now? You're a confident person now.
No, I don't know. I'm competent, and I know what I'm competent at. And I quite like stuff like public speaking and speaking engagements, which aren't typically characteristics of timid people. But um, no, for mine was strictly, to be honest, I think a lot of the lack of confidence I have was probably born from off-field stuff. Um, wasn't very good with girls, sort of at that age, and when you're, a teenage bloke, that can be pretty tough to deal with. I didn't think I was that good a footballer growing up, even though other people assured me they knew I was. Um, so a lot of it was just that. So I'm probably a lot better now and a lot more comfortable now. I would hope so, at least in my mid 30s and on the other side of a long career. But um, yeah, I know kind of where my strengths lie and where they don't lie, and as long as I kind of stay within the bounds of what I'm competent at, I'm pretty confident.
When people told you that you were good, was there sort of like, I'm just playing the game, it's fun, etc. But they're like, no,
Mm.
actually, you're really good. Did you struggle with that a little bit?
Yeah, I did. Look, I knew I was above average, but I didn't perceive myself as being much better than that. And I talk about it a bit in my book, where there was a bit of a tipping point at the age of about 16, where even I began to sort of see that I was probably excelling away from my peers. But even that sort of confidence in my own footballing ability, when eventually did come, was exclusively restricted to the hour of the game or the hour and a half of the game back home. And it completely dissipated as soon as the game finished, and it didn't appear again until the ball was bounced in the next game. So my confidence was still restricted to just the on field, but I did begin to sort of notice that I was excelling. And again, in the process of writing the book a couple of years ago, I did speak to a lot of people who were involved in coaching back then, and I'm not sure if they're just rewriting history because of how things panned out. Basically, to a man, all the coaches I had at that age were pretty confident that they could see early on I was going to be a pretty good player. But that's just not my perception of it at all. But they assure me that there was never a doubt in their minds.
What about the feedback? Did you take feedback well?
Yeah, I did. I always took feedback quite well. And it was like I had great coaches growing up, and I didn't have too many super old school coaches that would give you a dressing down. Like I don't really remember that at all. Um, but I did take feedback well, and it did help that I had a great relationship. Like you have to remember as well, it's the same here, I guess, that when you're growing up, your coaches are your best mate's dad and your teacher. Like they're people who are kind of invested in the community and have some kind of tie to you and your family and stuff. So feedback has never been an issue for me. In fact, I quite like it. I made this point before to a younger player. I think what players feel like they have to say is that they want feedback between the eyes and they want it hard and just give it to me honest. I don't really think many players like that. I think that's a bit of a cop out. I think there's very few people who are wired that way. I want honest and direct feedback, but I also liked the reinforcement once I'd responded. I don't think it can just be this is what you need to do and then that's it. I didn't respond in the long term well to that type of stuff, but I did quite like being challenged, addressing an issue, and then getting the positive reinforcement down the line. And that's typically the type of coaching I responded best to.
And then when you sort of grew and learned as a player and advanced your career in terms of, I suppose, the mindset and the superpower that you possess more than why would someone pick Zach versus someone else? What do you think that was?
Um, Eventually, it's just the blocks that you build. Like at a certain point, it becomes undeniable that you've done the work, and that you've earned your spot. I can remember doing an exercise early into my career at Carlton where before the season started, we had to break up into groups and we had to pick the team for round one that was going to play. I think I must have played 9 or 10 games in my first or my second year in the system, but it was the first year I'd played AFL. So I was kind of vying with other halfbacks on the team, and one of them was a guy called Jordan Russell, who I love. He helped me so much. He's a coach at the minute, just wonderful, wonderful person. But he was kind of the guy that I was maybe competing with. And in my group, I was asked if I should start ahead of him. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I'm quite confident I said probably not. Um, because again, that's just more a reflection of my timid nature. It's not what I thought, it's not what I believed, but I wasn't going to proclaim that to everybody that I should be playing against ahead of this guy who I really respected. And I'm probably still slightly wired like that, but I just think at a certain point, uh, the work you've done and the performances you've put in kind of speak for themselves. And I've always felt like I was a little bit on the edge, even as a really well established AFL player. And I think it probably served me quite well. Imposter syndrome, I think, is what people like to call it. And I think I've probably got it absolutely up to my eyeballs, but it's probably served me well.
When you were playing through your career, did you feel like at some point through your career there was like, I need to keep my spot or I need to keep this kind of
Mm.
going versus actually just being a little bit more free and going, just playing footy and enjoying it?
Yeah, so I probably felt like I had to hold my spot for the entirety of the first half of my career, I would say my Carlton career. And I had some really good years there where I was clearly solidified in the side. In fact, was probably one of our better players. And then when I jumped ship and changed clubs, I kind of thought this is an opportunity where the people at Geelong don't know anything about me really. They don't know if I am full of confidence or if I'm desperately low on it, or they don't know if I'm really vocal in meetings or if I'm more of an on-field type operator. So I kind of use that as an opportunity to just reinvent myself. I made a really conscious effort to be more vocal in meetings, despite the fact I was kind of new at the club. Try and take on some kind of a leadership role. I always harbored ambitions to be a leader, to be potentially a captain someday, to at very least be in the leadership group, which I never got to be at Carlton. I put myself forward for it once and it went down like the absolute Hindenburg, and that was really hard. And then I found myself at Geelong and managed to get into the leadership group in my second year. So it's just things can change quickly, and I kind of used the change of scenery as an opportunity to try and reinvent myself.
And as a player there at Carlton, that era, was it around about you excelling as a player and obviously the team to win a premiership? And the same thing when it happened to Geelong, was the premiership always in the back of your mind?
Yeah, it's why you play. Once you become an established player, that's all that was kind of driving me. And it was driving me towards the end of my Carlton career as well, despite the fact at that period they were kind of a long way off competing. These things tend to turn quickly. So that was always the ambition. But then, you do move and you get to a club that are at a different stage in their development, which is kind of expecting to win one now, more or less. And became really close a few times, and each loss became harder to take. I became a worse loser with experience, which I think is probably counterintuitive, but I did. I began to take them a lot worse than I did early in my career. But it's because you become sort of infatuated with the prospect of winning one. And every year that goes by, you don't win one, you're fully aware that you're 1 year closer to the end, and that's one more chance gone. And it became a little bit all encompassing, to be honest, in maybe a not super healthy way. But fortunately, we got there in the end, and it gives you a vastly different outlook on your career.
I was going to say the vastly different outlook if hypothetically you didn't win one.
Mm. So
How
I
would you
said,
think about that?
yeah, I said in an interview in 2020 or 2021, after we'd lost the grand final or the prelim, I was doing an interview with a guy for an Irish outlet back home, and he asked me a similar question at that point, how I viewed my career, and he was, glowing about what I'd achieved up until that point. And I made the point that the reality is, if I finished my career without a premiership, I'm not fully sure how I could look on it as a success. Um, you can't say your goal is to win a premiership, not win one, and then turn around and say it's a success. Now, maybe other people have different metrics for what success is, and I think failure would have been too strong a word. I certainly wouldn't have called my career a failure if I hadn't won it, but I don't know if I'd be really calling it a full blown success. So I said that prior to winning one. Obviously, we managed to win one in 22, and yeah, I spoke to a couple of my teammates, my more senior teammates, and it was just this sense of, no matter what happens from now on, we could never win a game again for the rest of our careers. We're Premiership players, and that can't be taken away. And you've got this bond to that group. You've got this connection now to the club forever. And every now and then, I must admit, I do sit back and just kind of reminisce about the day. And I don't have the medal anymore. I gave it to my parents, but I do. When I had it, I used to just every now and then just go and have a look at it and think, geez, this gives you a different feel on your own career.
With that quasi obsession that you mentioned around the premiership, and rightly so, you should be very proud of what you achieved in terms of looking back. It probably does get better with age, like a red wine. But are you obsessed about anything now?
Well, I have a strange personality type that I touched on as well. And I'm not sure what it is, and I'm sure there's some name for it, but I have a tendency to become hyper fixated for short periods of times on different things. And these can be as random as anything. So you mentioned wine. I have a tendency to go down these wine rabbit holes for months, where I become infatuated with the prospect of how it's made. And then, do I want to get into the import export business post career? That's something I'd love to do. And then I'll park that and move on to watches, and I start looking at how watches get made. So I'm not sure um, what it is exactly. But again, it's probably one of those strange character traits that served me quite well in my playing days, because if there's an area of your game that needs work, it's quite easy or it was easy for me to become a little bit obsessed with trying to get it right. Um, so for me right now, I have to admit, this is my second year out of the game. This feels like my first year out of the game. Last year was hectic. Last year was super busy. Whereas this year feels like a bit of a step away. And this right now is kind of how I imagined retirement would feel, where it's a bit like, well, I'm in a position where I can sort of take my time and figure out exactly where I want to go career wise, which is nice and a little bit daunting, but it's mostly exciting.
Are you a wine snob?
I'm a little bit of a wine snob, yeah, yeah. I try not to be too bad. Same with coffee. I like to think I'm not a coffee snob, but I've thrown out more coffees in the last 12 months than I care to admit, from different places. So maybe I am. Um, yeah, I think it's not. Yeah, I am a bit of a wine snob. I'm not too bad. I'm not as bad as some of my teammates. A lot of our teammates are bloody awful wine snobs. You wouldn't believe.
Right.
A little bit of a wine club, or a sommelier wannabe group in the club.
I had an interview with Jack Riewoldt the other day. He seems like a bit of a wine snob. He loves
Yeah.
any wine. So I'm curious. Let's go down this rabbit hole and let's digress, because that's what we do. Your favourite wine?
So I flip flop a little bit. So the wines that I like the most are typically wines I had a good experience drinking, as in the occasion. And there's Taylor's the Pioneer and Taylor's the Visionary, are a Cab Sav and a Shiraz from Taylor's that I had the night we lost the 2020 grand final, which doesn't seem like much of a good occasion, but we lost it, got back to the hotel, and it was quite a morbid sort of feeling, as you can imagine. And then me and a couple of the guys I'm really close to, Reece Stanley, we snuck off and opened these bottles of wine that I had, and we ended up just having an amazing night. So I'm not sure if my affection towards that particular wine is because of the wine or the occasion. Now, it is an exceptional wine, um, but that's the one that always springs to mind. And for the very same reason, there's a basket press Rockford basket press from South Australia that I'm bloody love for the exact same reason. It was actually myself and Reese again. God, maybe there's a trend here. Had snuck away off the back of a horror loss. God, there is a trend here. And we had the basket press, so that would be one. That's quite a heavy full-on wine though, so I would advise letting it sit for quite some time.
No, for sure. I remember having the basket press or getting introduced to the basket press many years ago, and people were like, this is the Grange without the Grange price tag.
Yeah, and we actually had it. We opened it. We were in a hotel room in Perth, and we opened it and we just started drinking off through it, and it punches you in the face straight away when you just have it. And then by the time it was casual, and we sat on it for quite a while, and by the time we got to the end of the wine, for those who think letting a wine sit doesn't make a difference, by the time we got to the end of the bottle, it was just not even almost the same drink. Like it was so much different now that it sat for some time. So it was a fun little experience to actually do that for the wannabe sommeliers out there. It makes a massive difference.
Have you watched the movie Somme?
I haven't. And it's funny, somebody else mentioned it to me recently, but I haven't. I know the kind of gist of it, but sounds
Yeah,
like something I'd
the
enjoy.
obsession of getting that license, that sommelier license. If you had to go
Mm.
to any one wine region in Australia, what would it be?
Oh, in Australia. Well, it's funny enough. I think the top 10 from last year had a lot of Yarra Valley wines. So Victoria's really lifted its game. And Bannockburn, which is just outside Geelong here, I think was number one. It was certainly one of the top few. Now, I probably wouldn't go that close to home, but there is some excellent wine in Victoria. South Australia. I'd head to South Australia and I just think, I mean, the countryside over in WA is not bad either, but I've just had too many good evenings down in South Australia doing wineries, so I'd probably go back there.
I've got an idea for you, Zach.
Go for it.
You need to run gather round. You need to run a tour, all right? And we do a little bit of footy, a little bit of wine tasting, and it's Zach's footy and wine tour.
Yeah. Do you know
I'm in.
what? I did gather around last year, and we ended up doing a couple of little wine visits. And it was a cracking trip. But I'm all for it. If anybody wants to, if any of the wineries out there want to sponsor us,
Well,
and
there
we
you
can
go.
get over and
Hopefully
promote
this
their wines.
podcast can go viral. We can get some
Yeah.
wineries to distribute that. And coffee. Where's your favourite go-to coffee?
I've got a local here bakery, Pane di Matteo. It's here in Huyton. So they use Julius Meinl, which I actually think is Austrian coffee, funnily enough. Austrian or somewhere from that part of the world. But yeah, there's loads of coffee I like as well. I get the Julius Meinl here in the house. I've got a good setup over there as well. But Padre, I love. There's a few different ones.
You're sitting here in your I don't know, mid to late 30s, we'll call it, mid 30s. I don't know what you want to do. I'm mid 40s. What are you looking forward to about your 40s?
Yeah, I don't know, to be perfectly honest. I find myself in some kind of weird exploring phase, trying to figure out career-wise exactly what industry I want to end up in. Did a lot of media work, quite enjoyed that. There's a lot of I can't swear on this, can you? There's a lot of interesting
No, you can
characters.
swear on it. I just put that. The thing is, I can just put that E thing in it, so people go, "Oh,
Yeah.
you did."
Well, yeah, there's a lot of fuckwits in the media, and I knew that ahead of time. That's not a secret to anybody. Um, but just hearing some stories like in that space, I just don't know if I can mingle really competently with some of them. Although I do enjoy the media, and I must admit there was a lot of wicked people I worked with as well. Mostly wicked people, but it's just I don't know if bashing players if I'm quite there yet. Um, but yeah, it's for me. I actually find myself, which wasn't on the cards when I was playing. I find myself really drawn to governance roles now, so administration and stuff like that. So I'm going to try and maybe spend this year trying to upskill myself, do a couple of courses, and then maybe dip my toes into the kind of governance space, which is, yeah, I'm not sure. If you asked me that 2 years ago, I would not have said it.
Yeah, it's interesting because as a parent now, witnessing kids, my kids are sort of teenager, pre-teenager, and there is a lot of administration behind the scenes, which you didn't
Mm,
realize about as a player. Not that I was a player or whatnot, but it was just there's so much fundraising and refereeing allocation. Then the ref can't come, and then someone has to fill in and doing the markers and scoring and timekeeping. I
yep.
was like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is a well-run oiled machine, particularly in some different sports. And then there's parent behaviour. We can go on that path as well. But any interest in governing things outside of AFL, or is AFL going to be the focus for you?
Nah, to be honest, that would be my preference. I think would be to get out of the game. It's funny, like I still love the game and I love watching it, but I don't know how I feel. Like I don't know if I feel as strongly about it as I thought I would at this stage. And I think a little bit of that is that I still miss it. So it's quite hard to watch. I was again, not sure when this will go out, but Geelong played last night against Adelaide. I was calling the game on radio, and they ended up winning by a goal and a half in a good friend of mine's milestone game. So I don't know if I loved watching it because I really wanted to kind of be a part of it. So maybe a little bit of it is that, and players tell me that subsides after a period of time. But I would quite like to get out of the footballing sphere in some capacity. I would never like to exit it completely. I'd like to keep my foot in the door because I do still love it. But yeah, I'd certainly be open to moving into some other kind of industry.
What was the feeling of watching it? Was it more like I missed the pre-game competitiveness, the hype up, the
Mm.
adrenaline, the dopamine, or is it more like actually I reckon I could do that, and I reckon I should have done that, or if I was out there, I would have done that.
No, what I definitely don't do is look at players playing and look at them making a mistake and think, geez, I would never do that. I've made enough mistakes enough times. And I have noticed that the game looks a lot easier when you've got a nice elevated view. Um,
Behind
so I
glass,
try,
maybe sometimes it's
yeah, yeah. The game looks pretty slow, and that's certainly not what it's like down there. So it's none of that, and I don't think I could have played on. I'm actually quite surprised how bad my body is, to be honest. Now that I've stopped, it was hanging on by a thread, but I'm pretty confident I could have gone one more year, and it might have been a good year. I think there's a good chance it would have been a bad year, but it could have been a good year. But now that I've stopped and the maintenance has stopped, I certainly couldn't play on anymore. So again, there's none of that. I do miss the butterflies in the build up to a game, and when it's a close contested game, I don't know. I don't enjoy watching the players walk off the ground because that bit was so much fun. I can't even tell you. After a hard win, it's so much fun just talking crap out in the ground, and that's what it was like last night. So yeah, it's a little bit bittersweet, and it's still a bit raw being out of the game because it's all I've ever been was a footballer. So for the first time in 30 years, I'm not. So I'm just coming to terms with it.
Did you get nervous? How did you deal with nerves?
Now I got pretty good by the end. I don't really remember being that nervous at all in the build up to games. I think I was as a young man. I would get quite anxious before games, but I guess they just come so thick and fast when you're doing it for a living. I mean, it's every week, so it just kind of becomes the job. So not anxiety wasn't, but you get a little bit of performance anxiety. You can feel it kicking in just before you run out and stuff like that. But no, for me, it's kind of it was the crash and bash and the feeling in the rooms post games, and it was all that kind of fun stuff that I missed. Your life is a lot less exciting, and there's a lot less adrenaline over the course of a week when you're sat in the crowd watching the game as opposed to when you were playing it.
I'm wondering how you can fill that gap now. What do you reckon?
Yeah, so am I. To be honest, I am. It's funny. I got a training program put together for me. A guy back home put me on, and I went to go for a run yesterday. Sorry, over the weekend just gone, and I got 120 meters into the run around a running track, not even halfway around, and I did my back. My back seized up on me. So this is the kind of athlete you're dealing with right now. So I don't know how I'm going to fill it. I knew this would happen. I knew I'd have to find some kind of physical target to work for. I quite like bike riding. I'd like to maybe jump on my bike and maybe get to Adelaide. That would be, I think, a significant enough challenge over the course of a couple of days that it might sort of fill some gap. But now I don't know, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, no, that's fine, and perfectly answers. It's a good answer. I love the transparency around. Maybe you could bike ride to Adelaide and then reward yourself with a wine tour.
Well, that would be the plan. Yeah, I'd only bike ride there if the wine's involved. I'm not doing it just for the good of me
That's
health.
the incentive. Show me the incentive. I'll show you the outcome. Right?
Yeah.
We've got a couple of questions we always ask our guests, Zach, and one is your all-time favourite sporting moment. But I preface this. This doesn't include yourself.
Yeah, so for me, this is pretty easy, to be honest, and it's the 2005 Champions League final. So I watched it with my old man. It was Liverpool against AC Milan. AC Milan at the time it's one of the most iconic teams that's kind of ever been assembled, really. Liverpool were heavy underdogs, 3-0 down at half time, came back 3-all, won it on penalties. It's the best night in European history, like the European Champions League history. And if I had a time machine and could be at one event, hands down, not even close, it's that Champions League final.
Well, that leads me into the next question, which is our sponsored question by SwiftX. And SwiftX is Australia's most trusted cryptocurrency platform with over 1.5 million users in Australia and New Zealand. And as part of their campaign, Where Can Crypto Take You? I'm assuming crypto might take you to the Champions League final that you haven't been yet. Is that right?
That is absolutely right. If I knew Liverpool were going to be in a Champions League final, that is my number one sporting event. I could take or leave it if they're not involved. In fact, I'd leave it. But if it's a Champions League final featuring Liverpool, that would be my number one sporting event.
And who
Again,
would you like them to play?
I'd like them to beat United 15-0 would be my ideal outcome if I could just script it. But if you're looking at one of the European, can I just give an honourable mention? Actually, now that I mentioned it, I was going to say Barcelona. I don't mind Barcelona. I certainly prefer them to Real Madrid. But a close second for the sporting event I'd like to be at would be the 4-0 at Anfield a couple of years ago when Liverpool came back from a 3-0 deficit in the first leg. You
Yeah.
can probably see a trend here. Any Liverpool game is good for
Have you
me.
been to Anfield?
I have been a few times. I was there 3 times growing up with my old man. He took me over 3 times, and I've been a couple of times since. I went a year or two ago with a couple of my friends. We went over on Stevens Day, Boxing Day, to watch them play. So yeah, I've been a few times.
How do you go with keeping abreast of the highlights? Do you do the minis? Do you watch the full game replays? Do you get up live? What do you do?
Yeah, I'll get up live if it's a good game or a big fixture. I'll get up live, no problem doing that. A lot of the Premier League games are on nighttime back home now, like so 7:45, which is great because it works out at about 6 sort of ish in the morning for me here. So that fixture I'll always get up for. But highlights, not if they lose. If I don't watch the game, they lose. I am a bit of a suck, so I don't think I've ever watched the highlights of a losing game. But I'll certainly get up and watch the wins.
Oh, brilliant. Now, we've also got another partner in PocketSmith, and PocketSmith is the personal finance app for the household CFO, the one keeping the budget in check, paying the bills, and kicking goals. Over 80,000 Aussies use PocketSmith to track their spending, see their net worth, and plan ahead. And Zach, with all the money and things and retirement and sport and business, etc., are you the CFO of your household? Are you a budgeter?
I'm okay, but I probably need to give my wife credit here. I'm very lucky. I've kind of landed with a very switched on, quite frugal wife. So she's across it. We're both across it, but she's the boss. She's certainly the boss. And we budget. We tend to do a budget every kind of couple of years, as in reassess where we're at and then set it in place. But inevitably, I need new golf clubs at some stage, and stuff like that kind of pops up.
And
So
a new wine collection and some coffee.
yeah, you're right. But we have done a little renovation here in the house, and you can't see it, but just behind me was our old pantry, which is just like a closet pantry, and it hasn't been done yet, but that's been converted into a little walk-in wine room. So I'll keep you posted.
Well, there you go. I'll need to make a trip down to Geelong and taste some of the collection. Now, a couple more questions. The scoreboard moment, a moment in your life which is very very visible, and you recall it like yesterday, and from that moment, life kind of changed.
Yeah, so there's a few. There's a lot with my parents, I guess, that are just moments that I look back on really fondly. But look, I guess from a life-changing point of view, it's the phone call I got after my under-18 campaign, where it was the Australian scout um, who called the house phone back when that's how people contacted people. He pulled out a phone book and looked for Tuohy in the phone book. And the first number he called happened to be our house, and it happened to be me who answered the phone. So Jared Sholly was his name. He invited me to a combine in Limerick in Ireland, and that was in 2007. And almost 20 years later, here we are. So as far as sliding doors moments goes, that's probably the big one.
I'm going to also ask you for a shout out to any sort of junior club or junior club coach person, etc., that might be listening.
Yeah, so Portlaoise, I'm from a proud Portlaoise man. Always kind of never forgot where I was from, and now I've had a ton of coaches. My old boy, and well, my mother as well, for that matter, Mary and Noel. The old boy's having a bit of a rough time at the minute, so I'm sure he'll find this and have a listen to it. But they're clearly the ones for me that did the most heavy lifting and drove the length and breadth of the country to watch at times probably an awful standard of football or soccer or whatever it was, but allowed me to kind of pursue it. So they're obviously the big ones for me. I'm very lucky with the parents I have, but Portlaoise is my club. Yeah, and they're the ones that got me here.
Mate, that's brilliant. A brilliant way to end the chat. I really do appreciate having the time to have a sit down with you. A little yarn, a small little yarn, but I think this will continue later down the track with your different business ventures and what you're getting into. Zach Tuohy, thank you so much for being part of Scoreboard, and looking forward to supporting and helping where I can.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris.
This has been another episode of Scoreboard with Chris Titley. Go back and check out some of the other episodes you might have missed.